Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off.
All right, welcome back. Episode 20B, coverings with our special guest, Chris McCallum. We're going to get to the recording that we had with Chris about our coverings in just a little bit, but we wanted to sit down, Joe and I, and just talk about the fly stories that we've had and make some quick announcements. And then we'll get to Chris and Joe and I talking about the coverings, ways to cover your planes and make them look snazzy. All right. Without further ado, let's talk about our upcoming build parties. Last month, we really didn't have a build party. So this month, we're going to try to squeeze in two. One is a little bit short notice, but if you're on our Discord server or in our Facebook chat, linked into that, you will we'll post announcements there and you'll see them, and hopefully you can join us in. Or maybe you're an avid quick listener and you're hearing this going, great, and you'll be ready on April 9th. So April 9th, between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., that'll be a Friday night. We're going to do our first...
Eastern Standard Time.
Eastern Standard Time, because Joe and I live in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. And we're going to try something new and try to incorporate an easier time for our European audience, European listeners. And that'll be on April 24th. We're going to build between 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. I'm honestly looking forward to it. It's been a while since we've sat down. I know Joe and I both have a couple, I'll call them joint projects, ones that we're both going to tackle kind of our version of it, but we're both have some building to take care of and building to get to. So those are prime opportunities for us to do that. And so if you want to see the hidden projects that we're going to do, they're not really that hidden, but if you want to see them, come join us in the build parties and you'll see what we're working on. Okay? So why don't you get us started with our our fly stories for this episode. Joe, what have you been working on? What have you been flying? What have you been working on?
So honestly, not much since last time. Part of the reason this episode got pushed back a week is that I was hoping by now work would have calmed down and I would have had more time, and I haven't. And outside the hobby a little bit, just talking about how life can sometimes mess you up.
Oh my God, yeah.
Or you sometimes mess yourself up. I was relaying I was getting ready to relay some flooring in the house, and was planning to tie into some existing flooring that was already there. As I was tearing those boards out. It's engineered laminate flooring, but I tore those old boards out. It's a bit of a destructive process pulling some of the old boards out. I was like, I'm not worried about it. I got the new boards. I'll tie them right in and get going. And after I'd already done the damage, come to find out, the new laminate flooring was not quite the same color, was a slightly different print, and was not the same size, and didn't have the same type of lock-in mechanism. So there was no way I was tying.
And you said it was like not the same thickness, right?
Yeah, it's not the same thickness. Like it's just a whole different brand, whole different.
Oh
it's not the same flooring at all.
The whole time you were talking to me about it earlier, I'm like, well, okay, well, you just tie in a little different, so it's not so big. Maybe you trim down the one thing. You just kind of make it work, and you're like, and it's the wrong thickness. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty much a killer at that point. Yeah. At that point, you're done.
There was nothing to be done. So that resulted in, instead of just a room being redone, it was now having to redo the whole hallway so that I could then go into the room I've been aiming for. So God. That's what happened there. So that's been taking up some time. And then just work has continued to be carrying over into the evenings. But this last Sunday, I did manage to get out, and I got about 6 minutes tops of fly time.
Well, that's 6 minutes, though. 6 good minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing really to brag about, but, that was 6 minutes that I had.
Nice.
And literally, it was between church in the morning, because, again, I do the volunteer stuff at the church with the soundboard, so I'm there all morning up until, all the way through 1 o'clock in the afternoon with the church. Mm-hmm. And then I've got
that's a lot
3 hours, and then I'm there for students in the afternoon. So I managed to get head to church early. It was going to fly the old Fogey in the back lot where I have flown before. And so I took the old Fogey out there, and I took the simple soarer wing that I had cut the top of the Fogey off so I could fly with it. Finally got a chance to say, yes, I'm going to do this. And then I took the old Fogey wing, and I had taken the cutoffs from the top of the fuselage, glued them to the underside of the wing. Well, actually glued them to some foam board and cut it off, square it all, and then glued that whole contraption underneath the wing so I can now lay that on top of the fuselage, and it sits right. The Fogey wing sits right on top of the fuselage.
Right, so you have a swappable wing now for your old Fogey fuse.
Bit. Yeah, basically, I flat cut off, I say flat, sloped off the top of the Fogey, so that angle that comes up to match the underside of the Fogey wing, I kind of cut that off at the angle of attack, if you will, basically the front the front versus the back, and just cut it off at that slope. And then took those 2 bits that I cut off, which were just really long triangles, glued them parallel on a sheet of foam board, and then cut the foam board around that and spaced them such that they were several inches wider than the fuselage, so that when I go to put that wing on the Fogey, that flat bit of foam board is sitting on top of the fuselage, and the wing is still supported properly, and I can rubber band over and just go. So it works technically. I didn't have great flight with it, and I'll kind of go into that. I put the simple soarer wing on it, and I actually was flying that new motor you got me, that little jet.
Okay.
Yeah, and I put my new 4-cell in it, 2300 milliamp, and so put the battery in, got it all set up. Well, I started out and I was putting the 4-cell in, and nothing was powering up. And then I looked at it, and I was like, wait, there's that's my dead battery. So I went and grabbed my my new 4-cell that I knew was charged up. And by dead, I mean that was the one that was in the Spitfire when it stayed in the tree for that weekend.
Yeah, that's the one you need to get rid of.
Yeah. Well, I still want to take it out of the shop and see if I can get some life out of it, but at this point, it's probably too far gone. But so I grab my other 4-cell, hook it up, everything powers up. So I put that in the power pod, get it all hooked up, and put the simple soarer wing on it, CG it out, and it's good to go. It actually where I set the battery was where it needed to be. So got it all strapped on, walked out to the field, did my pre-flight, all right, ready to go, throttled up, and chucked it. Now, it was a little windy that day, which is just par of the course for us at this point.
Yeah.
Lately. The area that I'm flying is sort of a small play field out behind the church that has a tree line. So the wind does weird things there anyway when the wind is moving. So it was acting all kinds of bad. It was really, I won't say it was necessarily acting tail heavy. It was just wanting to nose up constantly, which the Fogey has a tendency, if you're throttled up too high, to want to just go nose up real bad.
Right.
And so I was throttling back, trying to get the nose to come down, but then it wasn't. So I was like, maybe it is flying tail heavy, or this wing's just not going to work. Okay. And so flying it and trying to fight it, and I said, all right, this isn't working. Let me put it down. And I'll swap the simple soarer wing off and put the Fogey wing back on it, because I know the Fogey wing works. And I'm just going to fly and have a good time. And so I landed it. Again, rough landing, but nothing broke. So took the simple soarer wing off, put the Fogey wing back on, and checked the CG. It was right. Throttled up, put it in the air, and it just again did not fly well. It was, it ended up shifting back and forth, it seemed like, between tail heavy and nose heavy. I was fighting to keep the nose down. And what it ended up being was that I was fighting the plane being tail heavy, and then it seemed to be nose heavy, and then tail heavy and nose heavy. It was just real bad tendencies. And then I crashed it on landing, trying to set it down, giving up for the day. And when I was opening it up and having a look inside, what I realized was that the 4-cell battery had the prickly side of the Velcro, and normally the inside of my power pod would have the fuzzy side of the Velcro. Well, this power pod had the prickly side of the Velcro as well. And so I was prickly on prickly, and it didn't even occur to me, because when I was hooking up my batteries, when I grabbed the first 4-cell, I looked at it, I have a double-sided fuzzy strip of Velcro, essentially. I have two fuzzy sides cut to the same length, slapped back to back, so that I can use that 4-cell in that power pod or some of your power pods if I was borrowing yours or loading you the battery. So I had it, but when I swapped the batteries, I didn't grab that and put it on the newer 4-cell. So when I put it in, it had nothing to hold it to the power pod. So as soon as I hand chucked it, it had some momentum. That battery shifted, and of course it was going to be tail heavy at that point. And then, so I'm fighting it, and I can only assume that when it went nose heavy was when I managed to get it into something of a nose down state. Maybe the battery shifted forward or shifted more towards proper center of gravity. And so, it was just that battery was just moonwalking all over the inside of my power pod. And so I was having constantly changing flight tendencies. So, in as much as I do my pre-flights, I'm going to have to now check. It's just something I take for granted. I pop my battery and I'm good to go. Check my CG is good, launch it. It just, because I have a system of my batteries have this, my power pods have, this other side of the Velcro. When I stick them in, I know they're going to stick. And if you're going to have, it's always worth, tugging on that battery just a touch, even if like you've got fuzzy and prickly in there, just to make sure it's a good secure grab. Because my battery was sliding, and that was my ultimate problem.
I've had similar problems too. Not that it was like the fuzzy on fuzzy or anything like that, but sometimes to get the CG, I'm using like a 1/2 inch of the overlap between the hook and the loop. So it's only connected by a thin strip of Velcro. And so, any kind of like acrobatics or anything, it might get loose. And then I start having the same tendencies where I'm like, this thing's tail heavy. And all of a sudden I take a dive and I go, this thing's nose heavy. I come back up and it goes, this thing's tail heavy, And I'm like, this thing flies like stink. And then I come down and I go, oh, that's why. That battery came out pretty much easy.
So and really what alerted me to it was when I was looking at, because when it crashed, my radio master then proceeded to tell me that it had lost telemetry. And I was like, well, it's on the other side of that grass bank over there, like maybe the ground's blocking it. But then when I picked it up and started looking around inside, I saw that the throttle connector pulled loose from the receiver. And I was like, my battery must have shifted. And so when I pulled the power pod out, I was like, yep, my battery shifted. I grabbed the battery and went to pull it. It just came right out. I said, oh.
Oh no. Yeah.
I see now why I was struggling.
Oh, yeah. That's all right. Well, look, so what kind of damage happened to the old fogey? You said it crashed, but is it like fixable kind, or is it like I'll have to rebuild?
I mean, it's replace a prop and I'm back in the air. I just didn't have any more time that day.
Yeah, some days it's like that. Well, that's good. That's good news. You still have the plane. You still have the swappable wing. All you got to do is replace the prop. And all I can suggest is that you take the Velcro off the inside of that pod, replace it with stuff that works. I mean, that's one less thing to think about. And then keep the loop and loop for when I come up, I guess.
It's not been a problem. It was a thing, and it happens.
Well, so word to the wise, right? Word to the noob. who may have a similar problem, find a system, stick to it. It'll keep things simpler, and that'll be one potential fail point that you hopefully won't have, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully everybody else is like smarter than me and will check to be sure their battery actually is
smarter than me. Yeah, smarter than me too. I do that too.
So, before I let you go, real quick, because we didn't mention this last time, and I wanted to, in that we didn't. Like there was a long period where we weren't flying. There was a lot of bad weather. We did actually get was it Phoenix RC up and running on my computer?
Yeah. And I was thinking about that today.
We managed to get it. So my Radio Master hooks up through the USB just fine. There was an emulator I had to get to connect and communicate. And once figuring out how to get all that set up, then you and I were able to link up in an online room, as it were. We were able to fly together. Yeah. And we were just in there cutting up and playing with the Spitfires or trainer planes or oversizing the planes and overpowering the motors just to
we did a little bit
just
of that.
To have some fun.
And I think what I liked most is because I know when we get together, one of the things we keep trying to do, and so far we haven't had much luck, but we've been wanting to kind of get out and do almost formation flying, at least to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
And that is a really great way to practice not just the flying and that stuff, but really the communication that needs to happen to really make that kind of flying possible. Because it really is a constant communication. It's like, okay, I'm going to bank to the right, aiming to be about, 10 degrees per whenever. And it's like, okay, got it. Just knowing what's going to happen is really critical to make sure that it actually looks like you're trying to do something, right?
Yeah. And I mean, sadly, because it was our first time trying it, in the simulator, we spent most of our time trying to find each other in the air because the camera in those things is like, it's looking at your plane. It's kind of difficult to look away and try to search the sky for anything else because, your camera's locked on you. So it was a lot of communication of where are you at right now?
Right. And I hate to say it, but like that's pretty indicative of what you're doing at the field. Like when I'm flying, I can't really look away from my plane for long, lest I lose it in the sky, right? So it really is a great way to practice. And I was thinking about that today, actually. I was like, maybe when we get either before or after we get done recording, we should really get back on that and just give it another try again and start practicing on a regular. Because I think it would really help us, especially when we get together, to be able to, fly, Mustang to Spitfire or whatever it is and have some fun with it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I'll have to download the FT flight models that they have so that I can actually, have it with semi-correct, I think, tendencies and flight style and all that. Because, what we were flying were the gassers were just straight up electric, but they were more like the balsa style. So be able to get closer to what we're actually flying. So
I think any of them, as long as we're flying the same kind of model and we're practicing formation flying, like I don't think it matters exactly which model, as long as we're flying similar or the same models, it'll be good practice. But yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, it'd be nicer to fly things that are closer to what we will fly when we get out there together. Yeah, good.
Well, that's what I've got, and I know you've been doing some flying, so why don't you tell us about it?
Well, at the very beginning of Buildrory, I had the ERC time save up, and I was testing it, and I tested it by cutting out an FD duster, which is basically the dusty crop hopper, or I think that is. I'm trying to think of the name of the. No, I can't think. The Piper Cherokee, I think, is the name of the plane. Anyway, so I finished building it and put the electronics in it, and I took a little bit of time to kind of get it to look like Dusty Crop Hopper. So, orange and blue, and then, the number on the side and all that kind of stuff with the little eyes. And I put a camera in the cockpit section, kind of right above his eyes, so I'm looking out over the nose. And I put some landing gear on it, and I took it outside, had a great old time with it. The maiden flight I have up on my channel turned out to be a really pretty good one. I think I had one faux pas where I ended up basically flying. I think I ended up flying it over the flight line for a minute, and it was a call as to whether or not to take a tight turn and hope I can control it and not hit somebody in the process, or just keep going straight because it was high enough, and then recover it with more control. And so I chose to do more control. And one of the guys at the field was like, "Hey, you're not supposed to do that." And I was aware, but if you're unaware, while you're flying at an AMA field, and generally it's good practice, you should only really be flying in front of you, because once you kind of get over top of yourself and behind you, now you're twisting around, you might lose orientation, and it'll be far harder to control safely. So keep it in front, and it makes things simple and safe for everybody. So shame on me, but at the same point, I was able to recover it and had a good old time. I then took it out again, and I got some FPV footage this time. The first time I had some issue with my FPV gear, and I was able to just fly it around for 10 minutes on a battery and had a great old time. And then, and I'll post that video shortly. But Joe and I sat down, took a quick look at it, and everything was going really pretty good. And then I think it did a weird kind of roll sideways tendency. And so I said to myself, and I started getting really comfortable at that point. I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I should try a knife edge, because this plane is really responsive to that kind of thing. It has good rudder control and good aileron control. So it's almost like a 3D plane. And so I started doing a knife edge, and I'm apparently not ready for it. So it took a hard landing, and it'll need some repair. The wing came off, the landing gear ripped out. And I think those pretty much the big pieces of damage. So it's repairable. But it'll take a little bit of a minute to do that. But it was a lot of fun. And honestly, if you can build one, it's really quick and easy, and it's worthwhile. I flew it on, I think, a 9x7 prop with a CPAC motor. Oh, that's what I messed up. I messed up the firewall. So I'll have to redo the power pod. That's not a big deal. But that's why I didn't go back out the next day and fly some more. I got out with the F-22 and flew some more with that. And I think the flights are short, but they've been a lot of fun. It's really, really cool to see the thing whoosh past you and just sort of take some low speed passes. I call them speed passes, but they're, it only goes so fast, but it looks fast when it's really close to the ground. So I was able to zoom past.
Slow down.
Yeah. Hey, and then you're like, oh my God, that is the ground right there. But I was out there with a bunch of the guys at the field. It was one of those beautiful Sundays or beautiful Saturdays, and it was just a really good, relaxed time, especially after all that rain. Everybody was just really excited to kind of be out there, if no other reason. And I had a couple of people, oh, what is it? Is that foam board? Did you make that yourself? And that kind of stuff. And then, of course, right after I finished, somebody brought out their E-Flight model or Motion RC, or I can't remember who made it. And they pulled out theirs, and they were doing their own kind of high alpha trick flying and stuff like that. And it was fun. It's fun to watch. So, I had some fun with that. And I pulled out and so one of the things I've been doing, and after I finished up the Buildrory stuff, I decided it's time to pull out all the old planes that I got to about 80% done and start getting them finished. It's time to really, really either shut up or put up, right? So pull them out, see if they fly. If they don't fly, get rid of them. Take out the electronics and move on to something else, free up some space. So I pulled out two ones that I'm working on. One is the Wind Freak, which is an old balsa model, and it's a planker, basically. So it's a big, wide wing, and it's kind of got a natural curve to it, a gentle, almost polyhedral, with a kind of a simple downward return on the ends of the wing. And then it has this long, thin fuse with a big kind of shark fin, right, for a tail that's right at the backside of the wing. So it's right there. And I cut out little stars and I taped it over so that I could see through, the sun can see through, and kind of get that kind of
Okay.
balsa look to it, I guess. And then I had the long, thin fuselage, and it turned out it's just basically rolled the Battleaxe foam board, and I kind of 90-degree turned the bottom in and matched it, so the top was nice and curved, and it's just really elegant looking. Turned out really great. Some of them I'm pretty proud of, right? But I made it really long, so I could only need to add like a nickel or two in the nose. And so what I ended up doing is like, okay, took out all that weight, and then I put an APAC motor or FPAC, so 2205, 2300 motor with a basically quad prop. So 5x4, 5x3. They're really durable. It's part of the reason why I did it. And I hooked it up it has a 20 amp ESC and a really small battery. We're talking something like a 2 or 3 cell, 450 milliamp. Nothing. So the idea is to basically get it up in the air high enough to be able to turn off the motor and let it glide for a while.
Okay. So you can get it up there without assistance.
Exactly. And so for the initial launch, I think something happened. I didn't have the strap for the transmitter, and I was like, how the heck am I supposed to launch this? I'm worried about holding onto the transmitter and throwing this at the same time, because it's like a 5-foot wingspan or something. It's really big.
Yeah, I'd be a little worried myself.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I don't know. So one of the guys was out at the field. He's like, hey, would you mind? Do you need help launching that? I said, honestly, that would be a big help. So he launched. He did a great job, and I think it was a little tail heavy because there's something with plankers. The plank planes, the CG is really close to the front edge of the wing, and that, in my mind, that defies what should be. Like in my mind, it should be at the spar. But on a planker, I guess because you want the CG to be almost at the center of lift. Whereas in a normal plane, you want a little bit further behind. Anyway, it's just a lot further forward than I thought. So I put it back, and then I think the control surfaces were a little out of whack. And so when I released it, it turned to the left, and it was not. And because the control surfaces are right next to the fuselage, it's a 6-foot wing, but the big surfaces are right next to the fuse. It doesn't actually have a lot of like controllability. What I wasn't thinking, there's a giant tail on the thing, right? It's all rudder, and I'm not using the rudder because I'm not used to it. And I'm thinking, oh no, this isn't turning fast enough, and it started coming back to the line, and I ended up having to kind of ditch it. Well, the fuselage, which is in like 3 or 4 sections that are kind of butt glued with like hot glue, didn't hold up. It just basically kind of crumpled. But they were in pretty big sections, so it was easy to just kind of piece them together, put some tape on it, and I went back out again, and I balanced it a little bit further forward, and I gave it a quick go. And I'll tell you what, it flew real nice. I was flying it around the field. It didn't really gain a lot of altitude. I'm not sure if maybe the battery I chose was like halfway out of juice, or it was a 2-cell and I thought it was a 3-cell. Just kind of grabbed something that looked like it was ready to go. And so I'll go back out and try it again. But it was relaxing. That's part of what I love about those planes, is they're relaxing. And I know once I get at some altitude, I might be able to catch a thermal and just relax and just kind of have it hang in the sky for a while. I just have to remember it's a primarily rudder controlled plane. So when I kick the rudder, it's at a little bit of an angle. So it gives a little bit of elevator as it yaws. So it ends up actually creating almost like a semi-roll action to turn the plane as it goes.
Right.
So it creates almost like a coordinated turn effort when you put the rudder in. It works really good, and I'm so not used to using the rudder. But I have a little video of it just kind of gliding around a little bit. It was kind of the end of the battery, which wasn't very big to begin with. And I told my son, I said, quick, grab it, get a quick video. I said, I think I'm running out of juice. And he's like, oh, okay. And so he caught the end of it, which was nice. Anyway, and then like today, my son was, we were looking at some online videos. I think Josh Bardwell was doing some stuff. He's like, how does it flip? How does it do this? I'm like, yeah, well, let's go find out. So I grabbed the Tina Whoop, and I had a couple batteries that were charged and ready. And so I plugged them in. And I just kind of tooled around the yard a bit and just had some fun out in the front. Did a little bit of, I started out with acro, and then I'll call it graduated. But I got comfortable enough with the controls again that I was able to do raid mode or air mode, which is basically how they usually do that in the DLG, the Drone Racing League, DRL, sorry. Drone Racing League. So the drone racers use the raid mode, but they basically set the angle of the prop of the thing, and they're really just throttle control to keep elevation. So they're only using the right-hand stick to adjust the angle that the quad is at. Whereas like what is that called? Well, kind of like with the DJI, like it always, when you let go of the stick, it goes to level.
Right.
So this control, that rate mode, wherever you leave the stick, that's whatever angle the quadcopter will stay at. So at the end, I was flying in that mode, which is cool. And it seems like it'd be really hard, but if you set it to the mode where it's just moving forward, all you're doing is kind of driving it around, and you're using the throttle to increase your speed a little and lose or gain altitude. So it's neat. It felt nice to be able to do that and feel comfortable with it. And I got through a couple batteries, and then something happened. I realized what was wrong with my goggles. It was Dean's connector XT60. What do you call that? Where it changes from one to the other.
Conversion.
Thank you. Like a little conversion thing that I made between the two pieces. Well, apparently it was when my soldering skills were worse than it is now. And it just like came apart. So the connection was pretty much faulty.
Okay.
And so I've since glued it back together. It'll be fine. Or I soldered it back together, I mean.
Okay.
You're like, glue's not going to work.
You know what? I was going to wait it out.
Yeah.
Maybe he knows something I don't.
No, I don't know. I don't. Not about solder. Anyway, so I put that back together, so the goggles should work great. But I was able to get a little bit of video of that. I can't wait to put that together and kind of throw it up on the channel and just sort of share it. But I know you got to see, what it's like to fly around, I guess, with a quad, which it's neat. It's a different experience completely, but it's a lot of fun. My neighbors are so tolerant. I'm always flying something around in the front yard, something little like that,
Mm-hmm.
But it's good. And then, on the workbench, I pulled out the old Beechcraft Starship that a guy on the forums had kind of designed, and he gave me like a chance to build. He's like, hey, could you build this and let me know what's, if there's something iffy with the build. And then he was not able to get it to fly. So I'm going to give it a try and hope, cross my fingers, it works. I'm using those $3 Hyperion motors that'll push 6x4 props on the back. You've ever seen, they're basically like the commuter jets. It's a dual prop pusher with a canard. They're really sleek looking. So I'm excited to get it in the air and see if I can get it to fly. So I'm finishing up putting in the electronics now, soldering up some connectors and a splitter between an XT60 from the battery to two XT30 connectors that go to the ESCs. And then once I do that, then I should be able to put some landing gear on it real quick, and hopefully it'll work. And then if that works, I might be able to entice my girlfriend to come back out with me, because she really loves like airliner, kind of stuff. Like this whole flying a biplane or a dusty crop hopper, like she's like, who cares? Like that's not important, But if I bring out a jet, she's like, oh, all of a sudden that wouldn't be a bad idea. I'll just check that out, So I'm hoping I can do that. I repaired the baby SR-71, and I've got a mount for another Hyperion motor, because again, I bought a bunch of those. So I'm going to mount up another Hyperion motor and give that another try. With any luck, I'll have learned and reduced my rates so I can control it. Last time it was fast, and the rates were set way too high. The throws were massive compared to what it needed, because the control surfaces are right behind the thrust. So it might as well be it might as well be thrust vectoring for where it sits, you know. So it's like that I need to reduce that. But anyway, so that's more or less close to ready to go. So I'm suspecting by the end of this week I'll have both of those ready to put in the air, and Dusty will be back in ship shape. And so we'll probably see them out again in a little bit. But I mean, that's what I've been working on, and that's what I've been up to. And I'm looking forward to being able to get a little bit more of that in the coming week.
Okay.
So I guess that brings us to what maybe listener comments. We had one comment since we last kind of looked. Actually, we had it from a while back. We just didn't. Facebook is a wild maze of subpages and places to put stuff. I
hate that I don't get notifications when things go up on our page, and maybe one day I can figure out why. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Joe would be a lot better to be on top of that. I swear. But so I'm sorry, Seth, that we didn't see this until just a little bit ago. But Seth Burge had given us a quick comment on the flying car post that I posted somewhere in the midst of Bilgewary. I said, awesome post. Post pics of it flying. And I just started listening to your podcast. Great content. Keep it up. So that was a nice little boost.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Seth. You know, and encouraging words are always welcome, and you know, it makes us feel good.
All right, and now for a new segment that we're going to start with and see where it goes. As we start tackling each one of these topics, one of the things that I found really fun as part of the builds is to research the history of the planes we're working on or the thing you're involved with, whatever it is. And so in the effort of, in that vein, we're going to talk about coverings with our guest, Chris. So I took a quick minute to look up some of the history of coverings with aircraft. So originally, the aircraft were made out of wood frames, and then they were covered by organic fabrics such as Irish linens or cottons, and they were used to cover the whole airframe. However, their tendency was to sag and let the structure get exposed to the elements. And of course, to counter that problem, they needed to do something to the fabric and help protect it. So they began coating it with oils and varnishes. And by 1916, which is a scant, almost decade later, a mixture of cellulose and dissolved nitric acid called nitrate dope. And honestly, we use very similar stuff nowadays, and we just call it dope. And it came to be used as aircraft fabric coating, and it basically protected the fabric, adhered really well to it, and it helped kind of tighten up the frame, because it would shrink the fabric just ever so slightly, and it would make it smooth, and it would be durable when it dried. The only problem is nitrate dope is extremely flammable. A flammable substrate like cotton or linens. So that was one major drawback.
That's fuel on fuel.
Exactly, right? But I mean, otherwise it worked really well, and it solved a lot of the problems. So one of the things they tried to do was to try to address the flammability issue, and they prepared cellulose dissolved in butyric acid called butyrate dope. And that basically protected the fabric from dirt and moisture, much like the other stuff did. But it didn't really adhere as well to the fabric as the nitrate dope did. And so what they ended up doing is basically kind of combining the two methods. So first they would coat it in the nitrate dope for its adhesion and protective qualities, and then they would follow it up with coats of butyrate dope, and then that would help reduce the overall flammability of the fabric covering and then continue to protect it. So that was kind of what they ended up settling on, and they used that for, probably through World War I. And then at that point, as you started pulling towards World War II, the German aircraft designer Hugo Junkers, famous for his Junker aircraft, is considered, he's one of the pioneers of the metal aircraft. By World War II, many aircraft designs started using the metal, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this because it is a French word, it's monocoque, which is basically, it's the structure is the skin. So they basically used aluminum skinning, which also provided basically a shell that was a structural shell as well. And then, and it was kind of needed because as the motors got faster and bigger and the props pulled the plane through the air faster, with the higher air speeds, they needed something that could resist the forces of the wind better.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, in modern fabric coverings, we usually use synthetic materials such as Dacron or butyrite and butyrite dope for adhesives, and it's often used in the restoration of older types of originally covered with more traditional methods. You'd use basically the Dacron and the butyrite instead to kind of, I'll call modernize or update the coating, and it gives a similar look where it's a fabric over top of a frame that's been doped. And obviously you have carbon fiber and things like that are also making their way. They tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they also add more structural benefits than the traditional cotton and linen and Dacron. So, and I mean, that's a full-size aircraft. And I know somewhere in the 50s, the plastic industry was burgeoning with new products, and one of them was that ultra coat or a monocoat, which was basically very thin plastic that when it was heat treated, it would shrink and tighten. And that has been pretty much used in the RC industry ever since, or at least a version of it.
Right.
So yeah, coatings have been an important piece to making airplanes the useful tool that we've had since they were invented back at the turn of the century.
All right. Well, thank you for looking that information up. I know you talked to me earlier today about it, wanting to bring a historical context to the coverings topic. So appreciate you doing that little bit of research.
Sure.
Do you have anything else before we get back in with Chris?
No, I have nothing new. I'm looking forward to talking to Chris again. Let's go.
All right. We're going to get back to our conversation with Chris, where we talk about coverings.
So what's the goal of a covering, right? It's hopefully to make your plane look amazing, right? Either you've got a livery kind of planned out, maybe some specific kind of scale look or something else, or maybe you're like me most of the time, and I just need to be able to tell up from down and left from right. So that way I can get better orientation. And certain planes are especially difficult to tell up from down and left from right. I know wings tend to be pretty difficult once they get out there. It's tough to tell top from bottom. That seems to be, I mean, they naturally have the it's going this way look because they're shaped like an arrow. But you kind of need to know if they're going up, if you're looking at the top side or the bottom side, because that's a big difference. Anyway, so there's a million different ways to do that. So we're going to start going through, I think we've got about 8 or 10 here. So why don't we start talking about that? Joe, why don't you, I know you've done a couple. You've got, you've done a couple coatings like spray paint or some skins. Why don't you talk about those?
Okay. And Chris, at any time, feel free to add in if you've got something to add on any of these. But yeah, I've done spray paint and I've done the printed skin. And with the spray paint, really, I guess one could argue that it may add, I will argue that it adds a little bit of strength to the plane, because I seriously think that Spitfire I built would have been ripped completely in half, except that the spray paint added a little bit of strength to the paper of the foam board. But all I was really doing there was lightly misting the foam board with the spray paint. I wasn't looking to like really soak it in or get it so wet that's going to A, take forever to dry, but B, risk delaminating the paper. And at the time, I wasn't sure. I'm actually still not sure if the spray paint, like the aerosol or the chemicals within spray paint, was going to impact the foam. So I was just doing several light coats to get down my base coloring. And then kind of once that base coat was there, I could go a little thicker. The spray painting was nice because it was easy. I mean, overspray out of the equation, where I got paint on my garage floor, but it was real nice, easy, just kind of spray, let it dry, roll it over, spray some more. Going gentle, I was able to spray, in the hinges or even the servos, and the servos didn't seem to get gummed up by it at all. But I know there's more that you can do with it to get a plane looking real nice, because I just did a big blobby camo kind of paint job. But I know you can do like stencils for positive or negative, whether you're doing you're cutting out and you're spraying inside of that, or you're cutting out and you're going to put that down and spray around it and remove the paper, and that doesn't get painted. So you can get some different designs going. Yeah, I liked how that turned out. Chris, I think you've done some spray painting with some of yours. Maybe even, did you spray paint your Mustang, or did you do something else with that?
Yeah, actually, the Mustang itself, it was just a straight up spray paint job. There was no polyurethane that went onto it, which is my usual thing. It did take a lot of coats. The Mustang itself was like 4 or 5 colors altogether, and each color probably takes 3 or 4 coats by the time you go through it, right? So there's a lot of masking off. So there a lot of prep work and everything like that, but you can make it look pretty scale, or like you do, man. There's no shame in that whole camo look either, man. Like, I mean, there's half my planes have the same sort of look to them, and like you said, Matt, it's even just about orientation, right? So depending on the plane and how you want it to look, or how scale you want it to look, there's always a different purpose either way. But yeah, with the spray paint going the light coats, that's definitely the way to do it. It's definitely you don't want to delaminate that paper at all, right? Because then you just, not only does it look bad, but it does take away from the strength of the plane as well. Oh, and as far as your garage floor goes, make sure it always stays dusty. That way you're able to sweep off the overspray.
Yeah, dusty garages for the win, huh?
Yeah, and between having done some of the spray painting on the plane, and my wife spray painted her what's now her office desk in there with a fire engine red. Like, I really got some overspray. I cleaned off my garage floor. Now, I didn't pay too much attention to the satin or gloss or semi-gloss when it came to the spray paint when I was painting the Spitfire. Have you found that it makes any difference as far as the application of it or the final result? Like, does it help or hamper going gloss or semi-gloss or satin, Chris?
I've seen differences in it where if you start out with a gloss coat and then you want something to look matte over top of it, it does take a few coats of the matte, like say a flat black over top of like a gloss red or a blue or something like that to give you contrast. It does take a couple coats to actually get that flatness back, kind of idea. Your first coat or two will still have that kind of glossy coming through kind of thing. But yeah, you do need a few coats to get that matte back. A lot of times too, it just comes down to the color you're looking for. Like, a lot of people like the Warbirds not to be glossy, right? But if you got like a sport plane, like something that's a 3D plane or something like that, they just love it to shine and look like, a piece of glass, right? So it all depends on what you're looking for, really, right? But I like to mix them up too. Like on my Spitfire, it should have been pretty much all matte kind of idea, because it was a Warbird kind of idea, but I ended up painting it a gloss blue, and then having the matte white and the matte black over top of it with the whole camo thing going on and stuff like that. So it was just a conglomerate. Man, 40 feet in the air and 40 miles an hour, it doesn't matter. Tell you the truth.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's something to think about. I mean, there's a lot of meticulous detail when we talk about these coverings, and I think the meticulous detail is primarily it's really for when it's on the ground and you're looking at it, or it's in your hanger right at home, and you're like, oh man, that plane looks good, because you get to look at all the details. But when it's 50 feet or 100 feet up and cruising past, the details, a lot of them get washed out. So one of the things, I got a question for you. Tips on when you mask things off. Do you just take like a piece of poster board and kind of tack it down? What I found is I always worry that if I'm doing one coat and then I want to do another coat over top and I mask it, I'm worried that I'm going to like damage the undercoat of the previous spray layer. Are there any tips on that?
No, man. Yeah, it's about surface prepping, man. That happens to me all the time, and I get too excited when I start painting, and I totally skip it out on it, kind of thing. But you got areas that are taped off, like you got any hinges or any poster board that's like taped down to like the foam board or the fuse, that kind of stuff. Make sure you take like a 400 sandpaper or even like a Scotch-Brite sort of Brillo pad or something like that, and really scuff up that. If you've used packing tape kind of idea, that plastic sort of packing tape, definitely scuff it up, because anytime you mask over top of that, like anything that's raw foam board or raw poster board, it'll take a mask and it won't pull the paint off because it soaks into that paper. But that plastic, it doesn't soak into, so there's nothing for it to bite on. So anything that you mask across that, like say you want a nice line that ends up going through a hinge line that you have taped off, and you're going to end up losing paint that you've already put down on top of it if you don't prep it properly. So that's kind of would be my big tip on that one for sure.
Well, that's good advice. One of the things I've also heard, and this is just a general tip, if you're a noob and you've made your plane and it's balanced and you're like, this is it, this is the best place, right? I know where I'm marking my battery, I know where everything is at. But then you go and spray paint it because you know it flies and you're like, this is exciting. Keep in mind the mass of the plane's surface area is behind the CG. So when you spray it, you're adding weight behind the CG, and you will need to shift the battery up just a little bit. I usually paint that stuff before I do the balancing and all that kind of stuff, because then when I mark where the battery's supposed to go, I know that it's balanced on the right center gravity point. Just go back and make sure that the center of gravity is still where it needs to be. Like you've got everything marked out right.
That is a good point for sure, man. I've actually, I think I proved that to myself since I recently have gotten a scale, and I was testing out to see how much paint actually weighs on a plane, right? So weigh it before paint, weigh it after paint, and see what kind of difference you get. And it is interesting, like the amount of weight that it really adds. Like say on the average plane that has like a 36-inch wingspan, you're going to add about, I don't know, it depends the amount of coverage you put on it, but you could add anywhere from 15 to 30, 40 grams, depending on how wild you are. So that's like now, if you think of 2/3 of that weight is now gone behind the CG, like you were saying, or even 3/4 of that weight because of surface area. Say you got a twin boom, that's more surface area kind of thing, or however big the tail surfaces are. That's all surface area, right? Even though it's thin foam board, you're doubling up if you're painting both top and bottom, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're adding like possible, if you've gone to the max end of the scale, another 30 grams to the tail, right? Between
and if
CG
you're
and the end of the tail.
Yeah, 10 grams behind the CG, by, what is it, 5 inches or something like that. That might be enough to make it fly tail heavy, and you may not recover it. So just as a word to the wise, that was one of the things I'd heard, and I was like, don't forget that, Matt. You're going to need that later. And that's why I didn't balance the CG on the F-22 until after I'd sprayed it. Like I didn't put the battery in and balance it until after,
Yeah,
so
good point. Right on. Cool.
Nice. Well, that's a good point. The only other real covering experience I have, aside from wrapping 2 pieces of colored tape around one side of the wing, give me like a double band on the fogey, so I knew which wing was which. Is a printed skin, which really for me has just been when I did the HRC Vulture, and then coming up when I do the HRC 7, and that was a different experience because it was an extra step in the building process of having to delaminate the foam and spray the contact glue onto the back of the skin that you then cut out, and then having to apply it and please, 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 if you go with a printed skin and you apply it this way, do not spray the glue onto the foam.
Right. The accelerants in the glue are basically dissolvents of the foam, so they will eat through the foam.
Right. And eat through the foam. It did, especially considering that. So two things there. One, anytime I've ever used that contact glue or that spray glue, was always glue your two surfaces, let them kind of tack off, and then beat them up, and they'll stick together. So that was my first expectation to do. The other is that when I went to Lowe's to buy my spray glue, I decided I'm going to go for the super heavy duty stuff that basically was spraying out of the can like snot. It was just spider webbed all over that, and it just instantly started chewing through that glue. And I know we talked about it before, but I ended up having to completely rebuild or recut out the fuse of the 7 because I just completely ate it up.
I remember, and I think our listeners remember when we were talking about that. What was it, October? Geez, that was a while back.
September-ish.
Yeah, September, October. Nice. Yep. Okay, so what are the pluses, right? Like, it's obviously we've got the warning, right? But why would you choose to go with a printed skin? What do you get from that?
I didn't have to worry about design. It was already done. It looked good. The color was nice. I wasn't worried about unevenness in color, and somebody else designed it. So I didn't have to worry about, is it going to look right? Like, is the final product going to line up, or the line's going to be straight? Like in this case, because somebody else did the work, it was ready to go.
Right.
And I do feel like if you glue it down right and you're careful when you build, there's some extra strength added to the plane from that. There's also extra weight depending on the paper they use. I know Sam was using some very high quality or real thick paper with his build or his skins, so there was a good bit of weight probably added onto that. But at the same time, as long as that glue holds, there's some extra protection for the foam there.
Absolutely. So what about color fastness? We didn't really talk about that with the spray paint. Most of the modern spray paints seem to be pretty good to sitting out in the sun and keeping their color. I guess we haven't had any printed skin planes for long enough to know how well they hold up to the sunlight.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. Chris, do you got any?
Yeah, I've never really done the printed skin thing or anything. I've laminated like a poster board or like a thick paper, peeling off the original foam board paper just for like protection on a belly lander or something like that on the underside or something. But yeah, I've never done the actual printed skin thing. So color fastness, I can imagine it would depend on the paper and the ink you're using, or whether you're printing them yourself or if you're getting them from a factory or. I don't know.
Yeah. All I can urge is that if you have it, keep them away from the window that shoots sunlight at your plane every single day when you're not using it, if you can. I've had, we do prints where I work all the time, and I've got some older prints that have lost a lot of color over. It's a matter of like 3 years of sitting next to the window. Have the window, have the sunlight coming every day. So if you're storing your planes, just if you can keep it out of direct sunlight, that's probably the best warning I can give you for a printed skin. I don't think any of us have had any of these kind of operating for long enough to be able to tell you how long they'll last. But I think it's as long as you can keep the plane flying. In my experience,
there you go.
They'll last as long as you keep the plane going. So. It's not like balsa planes tend to last. They seem to last a lot longer, so I think that tends to be a bigger concern there. So nice.
I tend to crash my planes a lot. I tend to crash my planes a lot, so I can't really tell you color fastness or anything like that, right? So.
Well, what that means is that you're out there having a lot of fun with it.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Well, Chris, you've done the spray paint and you've done some other stuff. Why don't you take some time and talk about covering techniques you've done, and then Matt, you can kind of wrap this section up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got like I said, I kind of got a lot of experience with that polyurethane coating. The reason why I like it is because it's not only does it waterproof your foam board so it doesn't delaminate, but it it makes it really a lot easier to paint. You don't have to go in such light coats after it's cured, kind of thing. It's
Okay.
Okay.
it just makes the prep work just so much easier, right? Again, if you do have any sort of packing tape holding anything down, or lining up your leading edge of the wing, or um, lining up your hinges or something like that, then you're going to want to prep it again before
Mm-hmm.
you do the polyurethane coat, because any paint that goes over top of it after the polyurethane, you got any masking on there, it'll actually pull the paint off, right? So you want to do the prep work as well
Okay.
with this. So just a heads up, but the polyurethane coat is really good for the foam board. Does give it it does harden that outer paper really well
Okay.
as well. It soaks into the fibers and smooths it out, so it makes it a lot more durable to like scratches, that kind of thing, breakage. Kind of actually even kind of makes, if you do get, say, like a broken wingtip or a broken nose or something like that off your airplane, it does make it a little bit easier to fix. Everything just kind of seems to go back together a little easier.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of pluses to it, but it does take a lot of time to apply sometimes. Like there is the wiping it on, or the actual brushing it on, letting it sit for a couple minutes, maybe do another part of the plane, and then come back to it and have to wipe it off, then let it dry and give it a couple hours of cure time before you actually paint on it. But once it's done, then your prep work's done, and then you just go ahead and you paint it whatever you want, however thick you want, kind of thing, right? So.
Right. And then you don't have to worry about it if it starts raining, or if you're, and like in your case, you got a lot of snow. So if you bust it in some snow and bring it inside, all that snow that's melting isn't going to
Yeah.
destroy your plane in the process. You don't have to make sure it's like moisture free before you put it away. I mean,
No,
you kind of want
exactly.
to, but I'm just saying, like, if you bring it into your car or you bring it inside to like do some things to it, you don't have to like, for me, I'm always like, oh, I better get a towel and wipe it all down and make sure it's all dry, because this plane is going to go to pieces if I don't,
Yeah.
because I don't
No,
typically
that's
do the polyurethane coat.
yeah, same thing with me, and that's definitely a big plus too. You do get the water resiliency out of it too as well, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
water will just bead right off it. You do have to use an oil-based water, or an oil-based polyurethane. Can't be a
Right. Well,
water-based one,
well,
but
why not the water base with the foam board?
well, the water-based stuff it'll delaminate the foam as soon as you apply it, given the fact that it is water-based. The oil-based
Okay.
doesn't
Okay.
do that. It doesn't take the adhesion out of the glue that holds the paper to the foam.
Yeah,
So
yeah, kind
the
of like
oil-based
reactivates
stuff,
it.
you can get it in just like a can, like a little paint can. You can
Mm-hmm.
get it in a spray bomb, rattle can sort of thing. However you want to do it,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it works out really well.
Yeah, I found that if you're going to do more than just like one plane, that little can is going to be the best bang for your buck.
Mm,
It goes a
mm,
lot further than the rattle cans do.
yeah, I've also played around with the colored markers like Sharpies and stuff like that as well. So like
Okay.
a lot of times I'll do those use that for like details. So like say I wanted to
Okay.
put panel lines down, or rivets, or little bullet holes, that kind of thing. You know the any sort of like line work for like windows or anything like that, or
Okay.
I've actually painted a whole plane that was just the white foam board. I've done the whole thing in marker, where it was
I
like
was
blue and
wondering.
white and black and red, and it was whole like rainbow of colors going on, and it was all done in marker.
Yeah,
Again, 40 feet in the air and 40 miles an hour, it, you
it
can't
didn't
tell the
matter.
difference, right? So
Right.
it was just all about orientation, right? So, but
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I like using it for detail work and stuff like that too. The markers work out really well. They're not
Hmm.
really they're not so color fast. Like if you do fly in the rain a lot, like say you do have it all polyurethane and the detail work is on there,
Yep.
it's not so color fast. It does stay there so that you can just retrace it over. It's not like it bleeds everywhere, but
Oh, okay.
it will fade in the sun, that kind of stuff. If you're using like colors like red, red Sharpie, that kind
Yellow.
of thing.
Yeah.
Well, depending on the brand, I guess some last longer than others, right? But
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're stealing your little sister's Crayolas, I guess they're probably not going to last as long as a Sharpie, right?
Oh, those are wax. They'll be fine.
So there you
I
go.
must know you're right. Those are good points. I was wondering if there's like if you've used different kinds of markers where like, oh no, the water-based ones, I mean, you trap it. Just do it on planes you don't care about. And if you're going to do something that you really are excited about, use like a Sharpie or something that's more oil-based or some other base material, so it'll stay when it gets wet. Okay, well, good. Anything else? I know you've done a little bit of balsa, so I know Joe and I are both eager to hear about your monocoating experience. But have you used anything else, or do you want to talk about the monocoat now?
Yeah, it's the monocoat. Like I've only done the monocoat once, and I got into it, and of course there's it's not just foam board and a rattle can. It's you got to get some tools to actually do it, right? So there was a little bit of expense getting the iron. The monocoat itself, you're looking at it like $15-20 a roll, whatever sort of brand you're going with, right? But
right.
So I had 3 colors going down on my plane: the black, the orange, and the white. So that ended up being 3 rolls at $45-50 kind of thing, just in your covering alone, right? So there's definitely an expense to it, and when you do look at what you get and what you need to cover, and man, it being your first time, you don't know how many times you're going to screw it up. So do I have enough? That kind of thing. And so
right.
You're definitely, you're looking at wanting to do it right the first couple times and not keep screwing up and making the same mistake as you're doing the process, right? So
right.
There was some practice work to it, man. I was apprehensive too, man. I was almost scared to do it, but there was Jesse actually on Discord here. He was talking about, he's like, get a couple of old sprues that you've taken the parts out of, kind of idea from like building the plane. And he's like, just practice on those. And I was like, that's genius, man. I should have thought of that, right? And I did a couple of those, and it took about 4 or 5, but I got my technique down with the iron. And then I had tried out a heat gun as well, and that worked out really well, just on like the larger expansive sort of areas. So, yeah, no, it was a little bit of practice, on, like I said, scrap pieces of sprue. And you do get your technique down. You do find what works for you and what works in certain areas and not in others, and that kind of thing. And you start out with a simple plane, and it does get to be pretty easy to do. Check it out on YouTube as well, man. Like I did a lot of research just on how to do monocoat and how to, apply monocoat over top of monocoat, like different techniques and everything like that, and what people are doing, right? So it definitely doing the research on it is definitely a big thing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, there's a lot of great videos on it, and there's a lot of mediocre videos, and all of them have different things to add,
Yeah. You kind of got to build your own technique from a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and, trial and error, and then find out what works for you, right? But yeah, no, I definitely got a technique going for, using the iron in certain places, using the heat gun in other areas and stuff like that. So, no, it did work out really well.
So so if you're new to the hobby, right? And you've only just started building, maybe having some of your first successes with some foam board, what is this monocoat thing? I mean, what is the product?
So monocoat itself, it's monocoat. It's going to be like it's almost kind of like a stiff vinyl that has its own adhesive. So its adhesive has a certain melting point, and the vinyl itself has a certain melting point. The vinyl itself not really a melting point, but a shrink point. So at that shrink point, it kind of pulls everything tight and takes the wrinkles out, right? So you apply it, you use an iron just to kind of like set a couple edges by heating it up to the point where that adhesive kind of gets a little soft and sticks onto the balsa. And then you get 2 or 3 edges going that way. And then, like I said, I'm probably explaining this wrong, but this is what worked for me, is then you go over it with either, depending on the expanse that you're going over, whether it's a solid or like an open cavity, and you go over it with the iron or the heat gun, and it pulls it so that you can get it all nice and smooth, and everything sticks down to the wood, and it's completely adhesive. So it's once it gets to that temperature, the adhesive and that shrink point, everything pulls together, makes it nice and tight and solid. Yeah, it actually adds a lot of strength too. It's funny too, because I was doing the wings on that Hare's Pits, and the spar there, just the wing, the twist that it had in it before I covered it, like there was a certain amount of force that you'd have to give it, but there was definitely some twist tip to tip kind of idea. As soon as I covered it, you can definitely tell that strengthened up by about 3 times after it was covered, right? So it definitely does add a lot of strength and solidifies everything. As long as everything that you've built at that balsa point is straight and square and everything like that, everything should pull together nice and be nice and strong.
Nice.
Okay.
I was always worried that as you're trying to do this, you have to be careful not to, I guess, do one side more than the other, and thereby introducing new twist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you do risk that.
Or do you have to like nail the thing down to the board, then do your thing, let it cool, and then try the next side or whatever?
Yeah, you do it one section at a time. Like say you got a full wing that goes from tip to tip kind of idea.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to start at one end and do like say the bottom half of one side of the wing first, right? So cut it up into 4 sections. One side of the wing, bottom half. The other side, do the bottom half of the other side, and do both tops, one section at a time, kind of idea.
Okay.
You don't want to try to do it all at once because you're just going to be manhandling it too much, right? So
I gotcha.
Yeah. But
Nice.
that's what worked for me, and I was actually kind of surprised in how well it did work out. Like you look at it, you look down it, kind of thing, and it's nice and straight. So
Yeah, it looked good. It looked good. I know your end product looks something to be proud of for sure.
yeah, I just got to fly it now.
You haven't flown it?
No, man, I don't have the conditions to fly it yet, man. It's still snow and winter, and yeah. I gotta wait for a nice spring day when I'll get that spring day going, man. You'll see it fly. I'll fly right out off the street here. You'll see.
Okay,
it.
There you go.
I'm excited to see that for sure.
So yeah, that's pretty much. I really haven't done much more than that. It's been pretty much all I needed so far. Do you? I haven't done any of the craft paper stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that we have here are more things that I've heard about and seen, and there's a couple that I've tried. One that I've done a lot of work with is colored packing tape. It was something that I think Flight Test kind of highlighted at certain points. It is awesome because it is high color. It's great solid colors. It's regular packing tape pretty much, but it's colored. And so it's got that plastic look to it, which is part of what I think people like, when they finish their plane in monocoat. It's this shiny look, you know what I mean? Like a high gloss kind of look. And the tape has a very similar feel. You can do a lot of details with it. You can get a lot of good, solid colors. I've done the entire I did the little Sea Duck, like the APAC, the 5-inch propeller Sea Duck. And I did the whole thing in packing tape. And that is an endeavor. I've laid down packing tape before I cut. I have laid packing tape after I cut. I've laid packing tape after the plane was built. And the ease of putting it down smoothly and in a manner that you can actually work with it easy, I would have to say is after you cut the parts, you can lay down the packing tape on top of those parts and then trim it a lot easier than when you have a fresh board and you just coat the whole board and then cut the design out. Because when you cut the design out, you get a bunch of glue all over your knife, and then the knife ends up gumming up and not being sharp.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then you start ripping your foam board to pieces because you put packing tape on it so it look really awesome when you're done. And then what ends up happening is it just doesn't look awesome. And the other half is those exposed edges where you're cutting between the top and bottom layers, they're going to be white. If you're doing a full color deal, unless your box kind of wraps around itself and meets, you're going to have exposed white edges, which maybe is fine, but it's something to consider when you're trying to figure out where you want to put your colored packing tape. And by far the hardest is after you built the plane, and unless you're just putting like some color. Like I've done a lot of the sunburst stripes and stuff, and those are really easy. You just lay a strip, you cut diagonal, and you put each diagonal down from a center point that you pick. And then you kind of do a series of those, and then you've got a really great design on top of your plane. It's easy to differentiate top from bottom. it's really good. But, some people have used irons to kind of like adhere the glue around edges and corners when it's kind of a tough to reach place. I've never done it, but I think it's because it's kind of like the monocoat. It's still plastic, so at a certain heat point, the tape will shrink, and that will create a tension, and it will also adhere at a certain point a little bit better, I think. So
I can see that.
I haven't done myself though, so I haven't really seen how well that works. But from the videos I've seen of people doing it, it looks awesome, and it's something I really need to start doing.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. Let's see. I've also seen people take Dollar Tree cello wrap, and I've explored that a little bit with a very small plane. I probably should have done it with a big plane. I created a balsa look with basically a spar and ribs, and then I sprayed the inside of the Dollar Tree cello wrap and put it on top and did it much like you would with monocoat. And I used a heat gun and a little bit of a heating iron, an actual like regular iron, which, as I understand it, the difference between a regular household iron and a covering iron is the thermistor's range is far tighter. So when you set a temperature, it keeps that range in a much smaller gap. Then there's a lot more swing in like a household iron.
That makes sense.
So one of the benefits, like if you find a good, look out for people who say that this iron is awesome. That's probably because it has a very tight range. When you put it at a temperature, it'll maintain that temperature a lot better than if you're like putting it on cotton or whatever, or synthetics. Just hope it's enough to melt but not burn through it.
Now, did you try using a heat gun with like a hot air gun with that Dollar Tree cello wrap?
Yes, I used the hot air gun, and I used it on high setting, and I had to do that in very small bursts because that was very effective at almost melting the cello wrap. And because a hot air gun, I think, shoots at like 500 degrees or something like that, some awful temperature. And the monocoat and stuff, that I think the temperature range is somewhere around like 250 or something, right? Is where it starts to shrink. It's in like 250 to 300, somewhere in that range. So when you're shooting 500 degree air at a thin coat of plastic, you're bound to create trouble. So doing it on a low air setting is probably your best bet, and you just be real careful. You put the heat on, you pull it off, you put the heat on, and you kind of regulate your temperature that way. What I found was that I did end up creating twist because a foam airframe is just not nearly as strong as some other materials like a balsa. Now, one of the things you can do, though, if you want to color like a solid wing, you can do the same thing. You put the cello wrap down, you do the spray glue, and you take it on that wing that you want to cover, and you basically put it on top, and you basically put it over top of the wing and kind of lay it down and smooth it out so it's all good. And as you come around the edges, you do a little bit of heat gun so as it shrinks, kind of like you would with monocoat. Kind of like you want to shrink it around the corners and the edges, and so it hugs it. And then what happens is that glue also activates with the heat. And as I understand it, it creates a beautiful, tight, plastic, solid color across the thing. Now, what I found when I tried a little bit of it, I tried it on the sample section, as I used blue Dollar Tree cello wrap, and the blue was not as consistent a color across the gradient. So you'd have blotches of dark blue and blotches of lighter blue, which if, again, I should have thought about it and thought, well, at 40 feet in the air, going 40 miles an hour, it's, what the heck is that going to matter? It's going to be blue and it's going to be some other color on the bottom, right? But it was one of the things I was like, that's not the look I wanted. I was like, I'm not going to keep using this. I think I'll do this. I'll try something else, But it sounds to me like the Dollar Tree cello wrap is really like the cheap man's monocoat. Know that it's not a high performance product. It's not designed for that. it's designed to basically wrap an Easter basket and then, heat shrink it so it wraps around the thing. But if your Easter basket, as you want to call it, is a foam wing, it's probably strong enough to actually hold to any shrinking pressures it has without introducing twist, and you get a large area of color quickly. So that's an option that I don't think a lot of people have used. I've seen a couple people on the forums use it, and it really does turn out pretty remarkable.
I've actually seen a lot of people use it on like indoor flyers. Don't they use it because it's really light, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's it. Right. It's Dollar Tree. It's super thin. Like this is a tiny, thin sheet. And you could get, I think they come in like most of the Easter colors. So pink, yellow, blue, red, and clear. And maybe an opalescent. So you can get some pretty neat effects with it. It's something I plan to use a little bit more of in the future. I just keep forgetting that I've got it up there every time I go to do something. And I go, ooh, spray paints. And then, or whatever it is, ooh, colored packing tape. Let me get some highlights on this, So that kind of tends to lead to the wayside.
Well, real quick on that, Matthew, because you're saying you're using, you're spraying some glue on. What glue are you using to put the cellar wrap on the foam board?
Sure. It's the Super 77, the standard spray glue. What is that? What's the brand?
7M or something, 3M.
3M?
Yeah, it's 3M. It's a Super 77, the
spray
adhesive that's known worldwide. But as I understand it, there's a lot of the other adhesives work just as well, honestly. So you can probably just pick the one you like best, that you've had the best experiences with, and go with that. I like you were doing with the skins. Like the one thing you don't want is a bunch of blobs. That's gonna end up coming through eventually. So that's pretty neat. I think so. The downfall is really just the color consistency. It's not as so that I don't think the thickness as tight a tolerance as it is with like a monocoat. You know what I mean? Because the monocoat, the stuff you can see through and stuff, it's really consistent color. You're not getting like blotches of deep color and light color. Whereas with
I really like those transparents in the monocoat. That's nice.
They make your plane really shine when you put them on. That's part of the reason why I bought the cellar wraps.
Yeah, you get to see the detail work on the inside as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And that's kind of why I bought the Dollar Tree, because if you make a bunch of holes in your wing to lighten maybe a section up, you can coat it with the cellar wrap and still keep the aerodynamics the same without almost adding any weight. You actually end up lightening the one section. So, and then you get to look at the structure, and it's like, ooh, look what I did.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so I did a little bit of that. No, I used packing tape with this. I did that to the back of one of my slope gliders. Sorry, I was going to pull it over to show the guys, but it's apparently attached to other things. So, okay, so that brings us to Doculam in a similar note, right? It's basically a plastic sheet with some pressure-induced adhesive. Is that what it's called? Pressure-sensitive adhesive, kind of like you would have with a countertop. If you buy the laminating strips on a countertop, you basically press it with an iron, and it sort of activates, but it's the pressure that's doing a lot of the work. So it's that kind of thing. So it's a laminate, plastic laminate with a pressure adhesive in it. And so what you can do is the same thing. You lay it across your foam, and you use either a heat gun, or some people use an iron as they go, and they'll laminate a project that way. And because it's really accessible, right? And it's relatively inexpensive. I think I bought a roll for $3, and it's 12 feet by 1 foot wide, something like that. Okay. So that should be really
just
good.
Coming up in the clear, like a laminate.
Yep. It's just a laminate, and of course you can buy different thicknesses. I think if you get really into it, you can determine which thickness you want, and of course each thickness I'm sure will have different strengths and different weaknesses, and depending on the project. Like if you're looking at an indoor lightweight balsa winding, rubber band wound deal, you're going to try to get as thin as possible, whereas like some of the bigger stuff, it won't matter. And one of the things that'll give you is it'll give you some protection, and same with the colored tape. If you color tape the whole thing, it'll give you some moderate moisture protection, as well as some durability. It'll make your foam a little bit more crash resistant. It'll have a little bit of strength.
Is that possible?
And as I understand, to make it more crash resistant?
Crash resistance?
Yes. And I've had things where it crashed, and I knew if it weren't covered in tape, it would have come to pieces. And
perhaps a better term is crash durable.
Sure. Yeah.
I think my crash resistance comes from my thumbs.
Yeah, that's a better crash resistance for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. See, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else about the? As I understand, people say that you can. I'm trying to think if they said that you can spray on top of the. They've had good experience with spraying on top of the doculam. Either that, or you can spray underneath and put the doculam on top, and it still holds pretty well. I think a lot of that has to do with part of the process is you kind of bring the leading or trailing edge around either the front thing or the back edge, and then so that kind of gives you like a little bit of grabbing. So when you're kind of ironing it and sticking it down, if it shrinks a little bit, it'll keep it in place, I guess.
All right.
Admittedly, I've got a roll here, and I thought I'd get to it by the time today came around, but I plan on giving it a try, and I will update us when we get there. And I think the last thing is basically paper mache. It's craft paper or a newsprint, and using like a watered down white glue, usually like a 50% mix water to PVA glue, and then you basically soak the paper. You remove, you build your plane, you remove the outer paper from your foam, and then you basically re-paper it with this, white glue infused craft paper, or some people use craft paper, but a lot of people use newsprint, which you can buy really, really inexpensively. And then you lay it across your thing like you're doing a paper mache project in large strips or however you need. There's a couple of tutorials on YouTube of people doing different things. And then the difficulty is that you have to wait, much like a polyurethane coat, where you just got to let it sit for a day, let the moisture dry out and that kind of stuff. But when you're done, what you have is a completely waterproof plane. It's easily paintable. It's far stronger. The surface is a lot, it's a paper mache, so it's a lot harder. It's a lot more durable against hard landings. But it can be a little bit messy. It definitely takes some prep, and you have to wait a while before it's done. Most of the time it's
and I imagine your transition between faces and edges can be kind of rounded out a lot easier with that method.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Just like any paper mache pinata kind of deal, you kind of run your finger along it and kind of spread the paper around it, and you could create.
I didn't actually get to do a whole lot with paper mache when I was a kid.
Yeah, I did a little bit here and there, and it was messy and fun. But now, as an adult, I don't know how much the fun would be in the mess, but that's okay.
One good tip with that paper mache method too, actually, is make sure you're soaking your paper in there and in your glue, because it'll expand. Like if you're just wetting it and then throwing it on the plane, it'll expand as it soaks into the paper fibers, and it'll start making wrinkles on your plane. Like you'll think you have one side done, and you go to the other side and you start doing the other side, and then you go 5 minutes later, you turn it around and you're looking at the original side, and you're this is no good. Like it's just got wrinkles everywhere. So yeah, make sure you soak it. Make sure it's well expanded. It's very soft, and when you apply it, it should it should end up nice and smooth, no surprises, kind of thing, right? So
yeah, and that's a good point too. Is because that paper expands with the moisture. After it's expanded, you lay it down, and then when it dries, it shrinks up tight like a drum. And so it ends up creating a really smooth, like where you might have a couple wrinkles, it'll smooth some of those small ones out. So, and it creates a nice taut surface. It's pretty cool. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a good tip. I guess if you use a colored craft paper, like a colored paper is your substrate, you could get a lot of color quickly. I don't know. I've never really, like, I imagine we could even do the printed skins and take a printed skin and do it that way. You just have to be a lot more careful. You know, I never really thought about it, and then when you're done, you've got this, perfect looking plane because the printed skin should be matched perfectly to your plane. And then when you're done, it's like hard as a rock, very durable, and it looks great, and it's protected. From moisture and all that stuff. So that might be worth trying.
I think so.
Kind of combine
it could
them
be your $1 million idea right there.
I don't know. I don't think I've got $1 million idea there. But it's worth trying, that's for sure.
All right. Chris, do you have anything else to add to coverings?
Man, I don't really have a lot of experience with a lot of different coverings, so I kind of have a system I go with. Like I said, the polyurethane, spray paint, and that's kind of what I've been sticking with. Monocoat was fun, but yeah, I'm gonna have to. I've kind of learned something here, so I'm gonna have to try out that paper mache, the cello wrap. I'm gonna have to actually pull a couple pages from your book there, bud.
Yeah, maybe.
Awesome then. Okay, well then that's going to bring us to towards the end of this episode. One of the things we like to do when we have a guest on the show is send them through the lightning round, where we kind of rapid fire some questions at you. We don't know what they're going to be. We're just going to rattle them off to you. Give us your first thought that comes to mind on those, and then we'll work on letting you go for the evening. How's that?
Cool. Sounds fun. Let's do it.
Matthew, would you like to start it off?
All right, let's start it off. Sit or stand?
Sit.
Pinch or thumb?
Thumb.
Micro, park, or giant scale?
Giant scale.
Scout, duck, or goblin?
Duck.
Snow, water, pavement, or tall grass?
Water.
Nice. Back bacon, bacon strips, or sausage?
Back bacon.
Build or fly?
Fly.
Honey or maple syrup?
Maple syrup, man. You're kidding me.
Okay. As a follow-up, light or dark amber?
Dark amber.
Nice.
3-cell or 4-cell?
4-cell, baby. Yeah, all the way.
Nice. Need for speed. Foam or balsa?
It's getting... I'm still a big fan of foam board, man.
Okay.
Nice.
Floyd or Zeppelin?
Floyd. You can sync it up to Wizard of Oz so well.
I haven't tried that.
Iron Maiden or AC/DC?
AC/DC, man.
Landing gear or belly land?
I like the landing gear. I'm a big fan there.
And possibly our last, but possibly our most important question, creamy or chunky?
Chunky. It's been a while since I've had some good chunky.
Nice.
I'm starting to get hungry now. Talking about maple syrup, peanut butter.
Well, congratulations, Chris. You made it through the lightning round.
Excellent. Came out the other side.
You did.
All right, so as we're working on closing this out, we're going to talk about what's on the workbenches. Matt, what have you got going on?
I've got a lot of pulling out the old builds and seeing what I can do with them. I have a friend who gave me a beta build, which I built, but I didn't put any electronics in it. I got as far as the electronics. And so I think I'm going to put electronics in it. It's a Beechcraft Starship, I think is what it's called. And then I did a chuck gliding wing. It's like a massive kind of curved wing deal, and I'm blanking on the name of the thing. And I've always looked at that going, I need to put a motor on the front of it. And so I decided to So I've got a motor kind of set in it. I've got the beta. I got to redesign the flying car, so it's a little bit simpler to build. And then I'll probably release plans for everybody to give it a shot. And I've got the baby SR71. I'm going to fix up real quick and tune it out so that I can give that a try and release some plans on that too.
Okay.
So busy. It's the sum up.
Chris, anything exciting on your workbench?
Yeah, actually, I only got one flying plane right now that I've been flying. So I got some gear that is just sitting around that needs to be up in the air as well. So I'd like to get another twin out. I think gonna be something going along with another twin. Either be a P-38 like we were talking about, a Warbird, something like that, or maybe I might even save that project for like a summertime sort of thing, put some landing gear on it, and then I don't know, I might do a twin between now and that one, just something, maybe like a little FPV unit or something. I also have the rest of the P-47 to finish off. So this is the Miniac RC P-47. I blew up to 200%. I had originally I had done the original scale that he did it at a 24-inch wingspan. I also did another one at 135%, I think it was, and that flew really well on the 2212s. But I have this Rimfire 3536 1200 kV that really likes the 4S system. So I've done now this P-47 at 200%, and it's going to work out to be a 48-inch wingspan. It should be pretty nice. So all like Master Series style, all molded and formed. So yeah, there's that. I just ordered a EDF today, a 50 millimeter EDF. So there's going to be something going on with the EDF. It's going to be my first breakthrough doing an EDF. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I should see that within the next, I don't know. I live in Canada, so 3, 4, 6 weeks, 3 months. We'll see how long it takes to get here, but
I hope it's sooner than later.
Hopefully it shows up. Yeah. So right. So yeah, I got a few things as far as flying goes on the workbench there. As far as like I said, I was kind of dipping my toes into the whole RC crawling thing as well. So I got that 1/16 scale little 4x4 truck, that Hilux, Toyota Hilux. So been playing around with that, nice. And yeah. That's pretty much it. Just waiting for parts, waiting for stuff, building stuff that's, you know, on progress right now, and get some flying and some crawling in.
Excellent. Well, I know that I was doing some modifications to my old Fogey. So I cut the top of the fuselage off and got the simple soarer wing on. I now want to go and take the bits I cut off and glue those back in, and then glue a flat sheet of a flat rectangle of foam board to the bottom of those, so I can still put my old Fogey wing back on the Fogey when I want to fly it, or I can take that off and have the simple soarer wing. I've got some work to do on the Corsair, like I talked about earlier, where I've got to figure out if there's any way I can free up that rudder, or if I'm going to have to go in and like take the wing off, which is going to be a booger to do. That I'm not looking forward to doing, but if I gotta take that off to get into the guts of it to do some more work. And once I get the Corsair kind of taken care of, I think it'll be about time that I dive into the HRC7 and finally get that built and see about getting that one in the air.
Oh, that reminds me. I think I've got the Texan T6. The skins came in just last week, so I'll probably be working on that too.
Nice. We'll maybe we'll start those two at the same time and see how they go together.
That sounds like a good plan. Nice.
Okay.
So Chris, thank you so much for being on.
Well, thanks very much for having me, man. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people reach out and see the new projects as they come out? Because I know, like, when you put together a project, as fast as you can put one together, which is like 3 seconds, you've gone out and flown it like 8 times and got some great footage that you put up on your YouTube channel. Where can people go see that?
So, my YouTube channel is North 49 RC. I actually did recently change the name of it. This is a new name. It's got a new logo. So going in a bit of a direction where the channel itself is pretty much all RC stuff anyway. So kind of thought I'd have a title or a name for the channel that reflected that, and kind of put that, the patriotism of being Canadian north of the 49th parallel out there. So yeah, you can find me at North 49 RC. That's what I got going on there. Of course, I'm on Discord every once in a while as well, so you can play around there as well, and catch up, do the build parties, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been a very active member of our forum over here, and I love it. I love getting a chance to chat with you and talk to you guys, you specifically, and then all our other people in the forum, all our listeners who chime in and kind of let us know what they're up to, and it's just a good place to be. Check out what people are doing. So thank you for being part of that, and being a good active member. It's awesome.
Yeah, again, thanks for having me.
Good deal, bud.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and bring this one to a close. Chris, thank you again. And for everybody listening, thanks for sticking with us. I know this one is probably going to end up being a bit of a longer episode, but for those that have hung in this long, thank you. Hopefully the information was good. Hopefully you were able to learn a little something, or just confirm some things that you already kind of thought. So feel free to reach out to us. Let us know what you've got going on. Feel free to send any pictures of different coverings, skins, things that you've done. You can reach Matt and I, Matthew at aviationrcnoob.com or Joe at aviationrcnoob.com. And we will see everybody next time.
All right, see everybody next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.